Welcome, everyone, to the onpoli podcast. I'm Steve Paikin.
And I'm John Michael McGrath.
Today on the pod, Ontario's election finance law has its day at the Supreme Court of Canada.
You know who's not in court? Increasingly, Ontario's drunk drivers. We'll tell you why.
And the federal government rejects a request from Toronto to decriminalize drug possession for personal use, probably thanks to a letter from Doug Ford.
In your column, my column, I'll focus on the bleak state of Toronto's infrastructure.
And I'll focus on two columns this week, one from our pal Nam Kiwanuka, arguing that people are struggling and every level of government doesn't seem to get that. The second one focuses on how Canada is still the only country that's still celebrating Queen Victoria's birthday and why that's not a bad thing.
It's Friday, May 24th, 2024, so let's get to it.
How's it going, partner?
Good. You know, a bit of a quiet week in Ontario politics. The legislature isn't actually sitting this week, but not so at the mother of parliaments. With British politics, the
Yes.
British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has called a snap election. And it did have me wondering, I've only ever covered Ontario politics in the era of fixed election date laws. 2014, a bit of an exception there, but otherwise, I was curious. Do you miss like the era of like the feverish speculation about when will the premier, call an election and all of that energy about snap elections? Do you miss that?
No. No. I used to think there was a great deal of effort and Sturm and Drang, if I can use that expression, around when's he going to call the election? Is he calling it this week? Is he calling it next week? Does this policy get introduced because he's got an election? Anyway, there was way too much effort worrying about when the election was going to be called. But I will say this. It's kind of neat that this guy has called the British Prime Minister has called this election right out of the blue. Nobody was expecting it. He's 20 points down. Most people think it's a sort of a suicide mission. Yeah. But, you never know about these things.
No, the campaign will be fun to watch. I mean, we have a day job, but I will be keeping one eye on British politics for the next little while. Election day in the United Kingdom, July 4th. And, as I say, I'll be interested to see how that all turns out.
July 4th was not a great day for Great Britain, as I recall, in 1776. But I don't know. We'll see how it goes this time.
I can't imagine why they picked that date. I'm sure there was some reason, but they've done it now.
Away we go. Anyways, on to issue one. In 2021, the Ontario government introduced and passed changes to the province's campaign finance laws. And for the first time since the Charter of Rights and Freedoms was adopted in 1982, the Ontario legislature invoked the notwithstanding clause to shield the law from judicial review. But the courts have reviewed the law anyway, and this week the legislation was before the Supreme Court of Canada. JMM, you were watching the proceedings. What do you want to tell us?
Well, so this case has actually been running for years, depending on where you started. It actually predates the Ford government entirely. But I'm going to try and summarize these things fairly and succinctly if I can. So as you say, in 2021, the Ford government introduced this bill to impose new spending limits on third parties. That's anybody in an election who isn't a registered political party. The Bill 254, which they introduced in 2021, extended third-party spending limits from 6 months to 12 months and did not increase the dollar amount that those third parties were allowed to spend. So a pretty substantial restriction on the speech rights of third parties in Ontario elections.
For sure. Now, the political context is obviously important here. Everyone more or less acknowledges that this was aimed specifically at groups such as working families, which was an incredibly successful attempt to, I guess, put together an alliance of public sector unions and run very tough ad campaigns against exclusively the Progressive Conservative Party. They were always couched as nonpartisan campaigns, but frankly, they were ads directed right at the PC party, mostly to the benefit of the Liberals, right?
Yes, this was hardly a secret when the government introduced this legislation. In 2021, however, an Ontario court struck down the crucial bits that we're talking about here about Bill 254, saying that they improperly infringed people's free speech rights under the Charter. In June of that year, the Ford government reenacted those changes with Bill 307. this time invoking the notwithstanding clause, section 33 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
And presumably the fact that the court is considering all of this and you and I are talking about it means that the discussion is not over.
Right. It did not end there. So I'm going to just do a little bit of remedial civics here.
We love remedial civics.
It's one of our specialties here. So the notwithstanding clause allows the federal parliament or any provincial legislature to declare that a law operates notwithstanding some parts of the charter, but it's not a total blank check. You can't use Section 33 to restrict people's voting rights or their mobility rights, and you can't use it to override rules about how long legislatures can go between elections or without sitting at all. So, the notwithstanding clause was a key part of the political bargain that got us the charter in the first place, but nobody wanted to give a provincial premier the right to make himself, dictator for life.
No, we don't like that here.
No.
So anyway, okay, so back on campaign finance laws, what's the latest?
Right. So the same public sector unions who had initially fought third-party spending limits, they quickly went back to court after the legislature passed Bill 307, arguing that the changes weren't just a restriction on their free speech rights, but in fact amounted to an attack on Ontarians' right to cast an informed vote.
Okay, so let's understand this. Free speech cases, the notwithstanding clause wins the day.
Yeah.
However, if it's about voting rights, Ontario, or any other province for that matter, cannot use the notwithstanding clause.
Exactly.
Yes, okay.
So the first Ontario court that heard this argument dismissed it, saying that this is a free speech case, not a voting rights case, and the notwithstanding clause applied, and there was nothing really more to say. Things got more interesting at the Ontario Court of Appeal, where a majority of judges there held that it was, in fact, a voting rights issue. They accepted that argument, and in that case, the notwithstanding clause was not permissible, or the government could not invoke it there. They declared the law null and void. Not surprisingly, the government appealed that decision to the Supreme Court of Canada, which is how we found ourselves there this week.
Now, the country's highest court does not usually announce a decision on the same day that they hear arguments, and they held to that practice this time as well. Now, you listened to the arguments over the last couple of days. I know you always like to remind us. I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on TV.
Yes.
But go ahead. What stood out for you this week?
I think one of the things that I found very interesting was a refreshing amount of honesty about the politics behind all of this. We already mentioned the fact that the law was all but expressly targeted at public sector unions. Justice Rowe reiterated that point several times in the arguments about saying, I think at one point he said something like the reality is that this law isn't going after billionaire plutocrats, this is targeting public sector unions. Another point that a different lawyer made for one of the interveners was that the only reason that this case was before the Supreme Court at all was because this voting rights issue had effectively tried to shoehorn a case into an area of the law to specifically to thwart the use of the notwithstanding clause, and had all sorts of warnings about that. I don't want to make it sound like there weren't actual, lawyerly arguments about constitutional principle and those important things. There definitely was a lot of that as well. But it was very clear that both the lawyers making their arguments and the justices hearing them really understood the centrality of the politics to all of this.
Sometimes when you listen to the questions that the judges ask the lawyers, you get a sense of how they're going to vote. Do you have a sense of how the court is going to weigh in on this?
I wouldn't say that I have a clear idea of, which justices are going to come down on either way. But I do think if you look at some of the recent precedents, I would be very surprised if the court decided to thwart the use of the notwithstanding clause in this case, if I could put it that way. We've already seen, actually, thanks to this Ford government, there was a recent case where, and I'm talking here about the Premier's decision to cut Toronto City Council in half back in 2018. That eventually went to the Supreme Court, and one of the issues was exactly how broadly do we define voting rights under the Charter. The Supreme Court, or at least a majority of the Supreme Court in that decision, held a more restricted view of voting rights, did not want to define it very broadly and expansively. So, as I say, I would be very surprised if the Supreme Court adopted that more expansive view in this case. But as I will say again, I am not a lawyer, and we will see.
And life is full of surprises.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's why they have the cases. That's why
Yes.
they argue them. Okay, very good. And with that, it's on to issue 2. Doug Ford's government is nothing if not tough on crime. The premier lets it be known whenever possible that he is pro-police and prepared to do whatever's necessary to prevent criminals from getting away with stuff. So, it was with interest that we noticed this week that the province is offering some people charged with drunk driving offenses a deal. JMM, the details if you would.
So when you are pulled over by a police officer for drunk driving in Ontario, you could be charged with a criminal code violation. That's a federal law, or you could be charged with a breach of the Ontario Highway Traffic Act that generally carries milder penalties. Because Ontario's courts are so busy and clogged up at the moment, there are very probably good odds, I think you could say, that a full criminal case might not be heard in a timely fashion. And so the province has, during COVID and now since, has started taking to offering alleged drunk drivers a deal. They will downgrade the charges from a criminal charge to a provincial offense, and that means no lengthy criminal trial, no criminal record for the accused, but a speedier resolution, the government hopes.
Let's put this on the record right away. Obviously, this is not for people who drive drunk and injure somebody or, God forbid, kill somebody. These are lesser offenses. But the problem is, because of a Supreme Court decision some time ago called the Jordan case, if you don't get your case attended to by the justice system, as they say, in a timely fashion, judges have simply, in order to send a message to politicians, thrown cases out altogether. They say you are not adhering to people's rights to justice in a timely fashion if people end up waiting 2 and 3 and 4 years to get their cases held. So the thinking here is, at least we will be able to mete out some kind of penalty and help unclog the courts if we get people to accept this deal and go for the lesser penalties. But I'm interested in this story because I think it's a very interesting choice that this government has made, because this is one of those stories where the Ford government's brand as a tough-on-crime government runs headlong into the realities of a justice system that is overworked, doesn't have enough judges working in it right now, it is overextended, and interestingly enough, the Ford government has opted for a rather practical rather than ideological solution.
Right, and this comes, at least this news comes not long after the government announced that it was toughing the penalties for drunk driving, among other highway offenses that, we just talked about that last week.
Oh, car theft.
Right, car theft, but also, drunk driving and others. As you say, it's an interesting moment for the government to choose, if we could put it, pragmatism as opposed to what they might be more comfortable doing it from a partisan lens. There's some substance here to the government's explanation. This isn't. They're not inventing the problem in the courts. The government did not write the Jordan decision. They would love to see fewer cases tossed because of these delays, but they have the reality that they have. But I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention, and some of the government's critics have pointed out that even with measures like this, even if we view it charitably as an attempt to streamline the administration of justice, there are still many hundreds of cases certainly that get tossed because of lengthy delays. Mm-hmm. So while this might be a good faith effort to address the backlog in the courts, it is on its own clearly not doing enough.
Right on. And with that, we're off to issue 3. Another story for you out of the justice system, this time involving all 3 orders of government. Let's start with the City of Toronto, which had applied for the right to decriminalize drug possession for personal use. When Premier Ford found out about it, he wrote to the Prime Minister saying, "This is the wrong way to go. Please do not give the capital city permission to do this." And now the feds have responded saying the project of the cities is a no-go. Once again, JMM, another fascinating example where expert testimony runs headlong into political reality, and this time, political reality won out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess we could just go over the political reality here a bit more explicitly. this subject makes a lot of people, a lot of voters uncomfortable. The idea of decriminalizing personal drug use, I mean, some people just have a genuine objection to the idea of decriminalization, and in particular how it has played out in other jurisdictions. It has also even people who might be sympathetic to the idea have had reservations. We have just seen in British Columbia, there was an effort to, well, there was in fact a decriminalization of personal drug use in BC, and the government there has walked that back. Now that's not a conservative government, that is an NDP government in BC, notably an NDP government that is now running for re-election.
Correct.
There might be, I think, in a perfect world, there might be a better argument for decriminalization if we had, robust wraparound social services for people who are using drugs and people who are addicted. I'm not going to scandalize anybody by saying those wraparound services do not currently exist in Ontario. So even if the Prime Minister had been inclined to grant this request, even if the Mayor and the Premier and the Prime Minister could have all gotten on the same page, the politics have just made it functionally impossible.
The politics is very tough on this one, and we have seen, actually, Doug Ford, we have seen him use his political currency this past week very effectively. He is the head of a party that is at 40% in the polls right now, unlike Prime Minister Trudeau, who is leading a party which is closer to 20% in the polls right now. And Premier Ford was prepared to use some of his political capital on this issue in this way. His office, obviously, the office of the Premier of Ontario writes the office of the Prime Minister 15 times a day, 20 times a day, on all sorts of different topics. They don't normally, or very rarely, I should say, make those letters public. But this one they did. Yeah. And Premier Ford put the letter out there saying to the Prime Minister, do not let this happen. And the PMO clearly made a political decision along the lines of, we are getting hammered on too many fronts right now. We just cannot take on yet another fight, particularly against a premier of a big province where we need votes, and he's more popular than we are right now. Ideologically, I think it's fair to say that the Prime Minister's office would have been inclined to side with the City of Toronto in this application for decriminalization. But right now, it's just too hot a political potato to handle.
No, I think you're right. And it's a shame because the problem that decriminalization was supposed to solve is still there, right? We have an absolutely devastating opioid crisis in Ontario. No less than Ontario's police chiefs have been among the loudest voices saying that criminal law is not really the proper way to deal with this. Right now, decriminalization is clearly not going to happen politically, but I don't know what solution anybody is offering instead. In particular, I don't see what solution the city, the province, and the feds could all agree on and implement.
At the moment, it seems impossible that all three levels are going to get on the same page on this one. And there we go. Okay, up next, your column, my column. Okay, it's time now for our regular feature, which we like to call Your Column, My Column, in which JMM and I reminisce about the columns we wrote for the TVO website, tvo.org, this past week. Get us started, sir. What do you got?
So I wrote about the dismal state of Toronto's infrastructure, particularly its transportation infrastructure.
Is this something you've ever written about before?
Yeah, that and housing policy, right? The city has published a report recently looking at all of its capital assets, basically all of the big structures that the city owns, and there is some relative good news in there. Some parks are reasonably well kept. Other areas are doing all right, but the city is literally billions of dollars short of what it needs just to keep things in a state of good repair. We're not talking about actually improving service levels. We're just the bare minimum to get things, to keep things running. And the point I wanted to make with this column is that I really don't believe we're actually saving ourselves any money here. When the subway breaks down in a morning rush hour, something that seems to happen more and more frequently these days, it forces everyone to either use more expensive alternatives or simply be late for work. And all of that has a real economic impact. I think that is an important part of the conversation about why The city of Toronto historically has had very low property tax rates, needs to sort of suck it up and fund its capital responsibilities. But I also think there's a broader issue here. And, a lot of the time when we hear politicians talking about saving taxpayer money, some of that is undoubtedly true, but I do think that some of it is also shuffling costs around and taking costs that are normally borne by the government and saddling them on the backs of individuals.
Can I jump in with a question here? Sure. I mean, presumably the longer range solution to this is to find new and different sources of money for the city so that it can keep its infrastructure in a good state of repair. But where those sources come from, I mean, there's got to be a list of 50 different options on it, everything from a municipal sales tax to an extra hotel tax, to getting more money from the feds, from the provinces. I don't know. Take your pick.
Yeah, and Mayor Olivia Chow has been using the example of the upcoming Taylor Swift Eras Tour concert in Toronto, saying that this will generate millions, if not tens of millions of dollars of economic activity that Ontario will benefit from, Canada will benefit from, and who won't benefit from? The city of Toronto.
Right.
The city of Toronto doesn't have access to sales tax. It doesn't have access to income taxes, but it's going to have to pay police overtime.
The city will.
Yeah, for the Taylor Swift concert. So, we need to have a broader discussion about how we equip cities to handle these kinds of costs. That has been ongoing for certainly more than a decade. Frankly, goes back to the 1970s in some ways. I don't think there's any sign of that being resolved.
Speaking of which, are you going to take your kid to Taylor Swift's concert?
No, we saw the movie though.
Oh, you did?
Yes, we saw.
Okay. I still got to do that. I actually want to watch it. I mean, I don't know any of her music, but she's such a phenomenon. I figure I ought to know more about her, so I got to watch it.
Yeah, the movie's good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and you know what? I have seen her in a Kansas City Chiefs uniform, so
well, there you go. Yes.
That much about her I know.
All right. How about you?
Okay, I actually want to mix it up a bit this week. I don't want to plug one of my own columns. I actually want to plug two other columns this week. The first one is by our pal Nam Kiwanuka, and in it she asks whether government priorities at all levels are aligning with the actual needs of constituents. And she makes the argument that all levels of government seem to be missing the mark these days in their priorities. And I think she plucked a couple of examples here. A lot of effort and expenditure on, for example, renaming Young Dundas Square, of which there is not a massive hue and cry out there to do it. Yeah. And yet at the expense of other things that maybe ought to have more of our attention. For example, she writes, in the country as a whole, while the GDP may be growing, people's immediate needs are not being met. The demand for food banks has broken records, including for first-time users and individuals working full-time. Some have nowhere to live but encampments. Many can't afford to buy a house, let alone rent. Now, this issue of encampments is something that we've been paying attention to. Absolutely. Particularly a few weeks ago, I wrote a piece when I was walking around downtown Hamilton, my hometown, and I saw this tent city sort of spring up in the square right outside City Hall. And I think the punchline of the piece I wrote was, we're going to have decision makers exhibit a hell of a lot more imagination if we're going to figure out how to solve this problem. Now, the encampment, that tent city at Hamilton City Hall is gone, but the problem isn't. I mean, they've just moved it somewhere else, right? So anyway, Nam's column is a good one on that, and we encourage people to have a look at it. The second column that I want to bring to people's attention actually isn't on our website. It is done by our friends at The Hub. This was, last Monday, Victoria Day. And you may notice we are one of the few jurisdictions in the world, maybe the only one left, that still has something called Victoria Day, a holiday Monday on the, whatever it is, third Monday in May?
Third
something
Monday
like that?
in May,
Okay.
yeah.
Anyway, John Fraser, who's a former journalist, former principal at Massey College, he's got a column on the Hub website exploring why, in this age of, if we can call it this, cancel culture, there apparently is no great campaign to cancel Queen Victoria. And the answer, according to John Fraser, is apparently because the Crown, under Victoria, and many Indigenous groups of her time made a lot of treaties, and there was considerable mutual respect at the time, and therefore there is no effort today, say unlike with John A. Macdonald or Edgerton Ryerson, to cancel Queen Victoria. And that's why this past Monday we still had Victoria Day. There you go. So 2 columns for people's consideration.
And with that, let's go to the mailbag.
If you've got a burning question or insightful comment, we always love hearing from you. Send it along to onpolitics@tvo.org. JMM, reach your hand into that virtual mailbag and pluck out a letter if you would.
Well, technically not the virtual mailbag this week. We are going to take a question from X, formerly Twitter. It is a follow-up to a question we had last week on online voting. Lorcas Hollins writes, good conversation. Regarding the question from the crowd about elections in Ontario, have SP and JMM explored compulsory voting as a mechanism to absolutely maximize voter turnout? Lots of interesting discussion, e.g. civic duty versus government overreach, even electoral reform. Worth a chat?
Worth a chat? I say yes, worth a chat. So let's do that now. Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot first. Do you have a view on compulsory voting as they have in places like Australia, where they have compulsory voting and the turnout is like 96%, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that they do it in Australia and there's, I think it's a relatively minimal fine.
It's like a parking ticket. It's $50 or something.
It's enough to get people to go to the polls. You know, the fact that they do it in Australia, I think, is clearly an indicator that, you know, compulsory voting is not a slippery slope to absolute tyranny or anything like that. I do find myself wondering, just because we were talking about the charter earlier, like to force someone to vote is, you know, a change in their rights. Let me put it that way. Clearly, there are examples where the government is able to force us to do things, right? The government can force us to sit on a jury. They can force us to pay taxes. In times of war, they can force us to serve in the military. And so for the civic good, you know, the government might be able to argue that now we're going to force you to vote. I would be very interested to see how that would play in the courts. And I don't know what the answer to that would be. Me, personally, yeah. We keep saying, like, we support high turnout here. It's one of the things we do support here.
We are not the target audience of this measure because we are. I've never missed a chance to vote in my life.
Yeah.
From the moment I turned 18, I have voted in every single election I could, and I bet you have too.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're not aiming at us. They're aiming at other people who may not want to vote. And I don't know. This would be, I think if you were at risk of getting a $50 fine for not voting, you might get off the couch and go out and make an effort to vote.
Yeah, I think, you know, I mentioned last week, you know, like online voting, this would not be the first thing I would propose. I think adding more days, that kind of thing, making it, there are lots of other ways to make it easier to vote that I would like to see governments do first, but I would not rule out the idea of compulsory voting.
I like the notion as well, because people have, when I've discussed this with other people in the past, they've said to me, well, what if I don't like any of them? And I say, well, okay, that is your right not to like any of them, but go to the polling station, take the ballot, and then refuse it. Or spoil it, or do something. If you, to me, just not showing up at the polls doesn't really send the message to anybody strongly enough or clearly enough that you didn't like any of the options available on the ballot. If you take that ballot and you pass it back to the returning officer and say, I'm sorry, I am refusing my ballot because I don't like anybody, they have a special category for mentioning that.
Yes.
And therefore, that gets noted. So, I think it's growing on me. I think compulsory voting is growing on me. So thanks for sending us that tweet, because you did prompt a good little conversation there.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, that is the On Poly podcast for May 24th, 2024.
You can follow our show on Apple Podcasts so that you get notified each time a new episode is available. And you can see the video version of the podcast on the TVO Today YouTube channel.
Any feedback that you have for us, we're happy to hear it, good, bad, or indifferent. Send us an email at onpolitics@tvo.org, and be sure to include your first and last name and where you're located.
This week's episode was produced by Maya Abramson, video editing by Colin Kish.
Production support from Jonathan Hallowell, Christine Gardner, Ariana Longley, Carla Lucetta, and TVO's Digital Media Services team.
Our managing editor is Katie O'Connor. Laurie Few is the executive producer of Digital. John Ferry is vice president, programming and content.
Special thanks, as always, to our crew for making this podcast look so good. And until next Friday, everybody, bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.